So this is the BlueFoxx podcast. I have Alexander Patsell on today for the Philosopher Stone series, and we are jumping into some philosophy, a little bit of a deep dive on the levels of the self, on the mind, and we're just going to go for it. It's a little bit of a freestyle type of podcast, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Alex, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, why not? Hello, I'm Alexander Paetzel, not Patzel. I didn't realize that was
Oh my gosh.
going to be a pronunciation. No, it's fine. It's better than somebody calling me Pastel. That always got on my nerves.
We'll take that.
I suppose I will be your resident thick Southern accent for the night. I don't really have a formal background in philosophy, so to speak. It's more of everyone has their own art. Some people draw, some people make music, some people are, artists of the mind. That's what I like to see. I like to view my mind as my canvas, and the different pieces and bits that I find in life that feel like something that I could live by, life lessons, that sort of thing. That is my paint.
I like that. That's perfect. I always tell people, like, everybody has something that drives them, and some people are like, no, I don't really have any talents. And I'm like, no, it's probably something you're doing and don't know, and you're so good at it that you just don't notice.
But exactly. Underlying talent is easily some of the best, just because it's not something you have to force yourself to think about. There's a parable, I believe, may not be from the Tao Te Ching. It might be from a different Taoist scripture, but it's a story about an archer, and he's profound. He is absolutely amazing with a bow and arrow.
Yeah.
And when he is just shooting, for the sake of shooting, he shoots with just magnificent prowess. But he goes to enter into a tournament where there is the knowledge that winning will get you gold. It will get you some fame, some fortune. And suddenly his natural talent becomes plagued with anxieties. What if I'm not good enough? What if I don't get the gold? What if I do win, but I don't win so hard as another person? They get the gold, and I get to walk away with a pat on the back and a pat on the head.
Yeah, the slew of overthinking.
It's a scary sort of thing to have to think about your passions, because where there is thought within passion, it becomes sort of muddied.
Right.
You get these anxieties poking up everywhere and somewhat ruining the true nature of it, the purity of it. There we go. That's the word I was looking for, purity.
Yeah. I agree. That's kind of like what a lot of people are now seeing in, like, the workforce, because they're starting to realize, like, the degrees are nice, but the confidence in the experience, whether the degree is there or not, is the key. And then how well they do with talking and presenting themselves with the confidence. I feel like the confidence is what sells to the company or the organization, or the individual just interviewing them is going to feed into that.
Yes, very much so. If you walk into what is supposed to be a first impression with someone and you don't give them something impressive, I mean, it is a first impression. It is intended to leave an impression. And if an impression is not impressive, then, I mean, you've thrown a pebble into the mud and hoped for the best.
Right.
You're really not going to get a whole lot. You need to have an idea of what you are, who you are, what you represent.
I agree.
And being very honest and forthright, not just with the people you're talking to, but with yourself.
Yes.
I could have come on to here and immediately just said, yes, my name's Alexander Paetzel, and I've got a doctorate in philosophy. I've also got a PhD in neuroscience, and I am the direct spiritual descendant of Alan Watts.
They would never know.
They would never know.
They would never know.
You can sell somebody anything, but you cannot sell yourself on everything.
That's so true. That's like one of my friends was telling me, she was getting into, like, jewelry, and, like, that was big when, like, COVID first hit and everybody's, like, doing their own businesses and starting to really branch out on their talents. But I'm like, hey, you're sitting in the house, you might as well, because I'm looking at it like, there's all this time. If your talent doesn't come out with all that time sitting in the house and people sitting on their butt watching Netflix, I'm like, oh, no. But a lot of those businesses started to flourish at that time, and she she went out to a little I think it was like a festival or something they had on the beach, and she said it was the strangest thing. This lady was on the beach selling seashells and melted crayons, like these art pieces, and she was like, it looked really simple, but she was selling them for like 80, $200. Like they were pretty expensive, but
Must be some bougie
it
crayons.
right, super bougie. It's like the Gucci and the Prada of all crayons.
It's that
But
real top shelf Grey Goose style.
oh
They're
yeah.
laced with natural incense. And
Yeah, but she knew it. I feel like that's what made it. She knew that she was confident enough to sell something so what seems so simple. Now, mind you, if I tried to make it, I probably couldn't just because of the attempt alone. And like that, I don't know. To her, it's probably second nature. But yeah, but that kind of ties into the way the mind works. And you're probably like me. Um, I'm a deep diver. I have to dig for some reason. There's
yes,
always another question to the answer that's provided.
well, it's I know it's something that you and I have talked about before, but
Mm-hmm.
it's the idea that it's if you go into a question seeking an answer, you're seeking the easy way out.
Mm-hmm.
If you go into a question looking for another question, you're no longer trying to solve just that question. You're trying to solve underlying questions. You're trying to
Right.
solve all the things that branch off of it. It's the idea that if you don't want that, that tree in your yard, that weed in your garden, whatever, you
Mm-hmm.
don't just snip it off close to the ground-ish sort of and leave the roots. If you want to really be shed of a question, or in this case fully understand a question,
Mm-hmm.
you need to get in there and find what the roots are.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's something I'm not going to say preach, but sort of to a lot of people, is that the accumulation of knowledge is not a terrible thing.
Mm-mm.
It is something that a person can become very, very greedy over, and it's a dangerous thing to become greedy for knowledge,
Yeah.
because then you also become withholding of knowledge, and that just damages everyone around you. But
Yeah.
knowledge is a very deep insight into a singular question. You know this question so intimately you can answer everything about that one particular thing. But if you're asked anything else, you might be completely senseless.
Oh, I like that. And I feel like
However,
if
I
mhm.
advocate for people seeking wisdom.
Yes. Yes.
You don't try to find the answer to the question, you try and find out what the question is.
Ooh, I like
You
that.
find out the makeup of the question itself, and from there you can think, well, if we carry from question one, we can find that there are directly connected several other questions,
Mm-hmm.
but we'll go and focus on questions 1.1 through 1.5,
Baby
and we
steps.
will contemplate those things, and we will find the questions off of them, question 1.1.1 through 1.1.5, and carry on through all these different questions.
Yeah.
You essentially end up developing, instead of an understanding of a singular topic, you begin to understand the root of topics, and you can be brought into new topics that are sometimes completely irrelevant to the first one, but you understand it because you have a basis of knowledge that's not looking for how to finish the question, but more so looking to understand what the question is.
Mm. That probably explains. And I don't know about you. Me, I'm one of those people that like. I don't want to say conspiracy theorists, but I'm always questioning the stuff that like social media is out there. The internet is so readily available that like whatever you're looking for, you're gonna find something on it. But there was this post. It's been maybe last year or so. It was something about Nepal, but basically it was saying that Nepal was in a different year than what we are in, and not by like 365 days. It was like they were 10, 12 years behind us. And I was like, hold on, how is that possible? And then just with that question alone, it started to pull in the little bits and pieces that I had learned from quantum mechanics, which is a very small amount. but it started this weird craze, and I could not for the life of me stop it. It just gained so much momentum, and then I was at the point where I was like, oh my gosh, Back to the Future lied to us. Like, who the fuck wrote this? And I was like, Marty McFly, hold on, one Marty McFly is still stuck in the loop. Like, he's constantly going back to the, well, technically he went back to the past the first time, but you know what I mean. One of him is
Yes.
constantly in the same place. And then that led to a whole new, just terrifying question of, well, hang on. If he is stuck there, what would that be like to be stuck there? And where is the awareness? Like, is his awareness in the Marty McFly that's stuck? Is his awareness in the Marty McFly that's already accomplished what he was going to accomplish and is now passed on? Like, what happens? Allison, it was an uncomfortable place to be, but my mind was starting to piece together things that it had never looked at before.
It's a beautiful thing. It's literally like finding something new to be curious about, something new to try and acquire any amount of wisdom, any kind of understanding over.
Yeah.
Is it's almost like you're staring at a brick wall, and suddenly some of the bricks just open up like a window, like shutters on a window. They literally just open up, and you get to look at something brand new
Yeah.
that you never expected. Because when one looks at a brick wall, you expect it to be a brick wall. It's solid. It's it's built to last. It's something that's not intended to just open and shut willy-nilly.
Mm.
But when you get to look inside of those sorts of things, it's so the human psyche, honestly, is a ridiculous brick wall in and of itself. Some people, most people, really, are so convinced that they are what they project themselves to be to other people, that they don't stop to think who they are behind closed doors.
Yeah.
They'll let people think, well, not even let people think, that's implying that they're dishonest, and while some people are, some people aren't, whatever, we're going to assume that the person in this example is being honest. They let people see these sides of them, and eventually it becomes this sort of convoluted circle of, they see this about me, so I need to be this about me, and they don't bother to cultivate the other aspects of themselves. And they don't lose them, but they sort of repress them, push them off to the side, and they start acting out in and of themselves. There's all the different parts of your personality are all like tiny sub-personalities in and of themselves. Wow. And if you don't pay them attention, you don't meet their needs, they will lash out. They will subconsciously undermine what your outward self is trying to do. Yeah. Maybe you fancy yourself to be the sort of loner entrepreneur. You want to have a house out in the country where you don't have to deal with people. You sort of own all your own things, and you make a living off of maybe having a business online, having a blog that's very popular, that sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And that is the self that you have decided that you want to be, and there is nothing wrong with that. I'm not trying to say that one person's wants to be something is wrong or right, but in this case, that sort of sense of isolationism is masked to the self as being independent.
I see what you mean.
Now, let's say that same person had the opportunity to buy a piece of land out where they wanted. Basically the idyllic piece that they want. It's out in the country. It's away from everybody. They can go out there and just be their own thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And for untold reasons, they wake up the day that they're supposed to accept that offer and basically tell the realtor to get bent. No purpose, no rhyme, no reason, no rhythm. They just decide that they wake up and they suddenly do not want the thing that they have been pressing themselves to become and exhibit to the world.
It's the question that I want to ask. I'm trying to formulate it very carefully because a lot of people freak out the way I word it. It's almost as if we are all schizophrenic because there are two beings in our bodies, and only one of them, usually, we are observing one at a time. I guess you could say.
Well, how to approach that.
It's a weird
I would
one to to tiptoe
I would
around. Yeah.
agree with the schizophrenia to a degree. Not trying to go at anyone that actually has schizophrenia. If you do, then my blessings, because
Oh
that's a
man,
whole hell of a ride in itself.
I can only imagine.
But it's similar to the way the schizophrenia works, but on a less severe manner. Schizophrenia usually is detailed with the personalities just sort of almost like on and off switches. Like you're one person, and then you flip that switch off, and then the next switch flips on, and then that one will flip off, and the next one will flip on, and it's not quite that sudden start stop. You're one person, you're another person from second to second kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's a lot more of your. We'll dip into the verbiage that Carl Jung used, and I apologize if this gives anyone listening a headache. It may very well, because it's a whole rabbit hole. But
The mind alone is a rabbit hole. Follow the
the
white rabbit.
mind in and of itself is a rabbit hole. We've all got one, so
Yes.
unfortunately, welcome to somebody else's rabbit hole this time.
Sorry, guys.
But you have yourself, which is the entirety of your being, your whole essence. All of you is yourself.
Yeah.
Within yourself, you have lots of sort of subselves, but the predominant ones that you're going to see are your ego. Your ego being the parts of your personality that you have accepted, that you have either come to terms with, or that you openly look at and go, well, yes, that's part of me. I am this, this, and this.
Yeah.
The other side of your ego, the other side of yourself from your ego is your shadow. And while it's referred to in a singular sense, it's not really singular in and of itself. A person can have numerous shadows within themselves.
Ooh. That's
and they're often depicted as these sort of spooky figures hanging out in the dark that are just our most primal and destructive urges, and they're not. They're not inherently evil. They are the parts of you that you haven't accepted, that you haven't taken the time to try and integrate with your ego.
I always think about. Oh, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, you're fine. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, it always makes me think of like the Joker, because every time I watch, no matter what movie it is and how he is being portrayed, that one, yes, did a fantastic job. God rest his soul. But it just goes to show you how fragile the self is, because as we saw with that, he got stuck in that persona, and I think and maybe part of that comes from the suppression.
That's a very good example. I hadn't really wanted to throw it out there, but that's a very good one. The Batman to Joker analogy.
Yeah.
The whole people are used to the Joker the way he is now, where he's depicted as being a lot darker, a lot more murderous, he's a lot more gruesome and a lot grittier than what he used to be. But at the same time,
Right.
Batman used to be a very lighthearted comic before it became this super dark, gritty Batverse type thing.
Yeah, man, I stay in Marvel. DC Universe is a different ball game.
It is.
You don't want to go to Gotham.
There's some stuff over there that just, I love it, but damn.
Right?
But the
Jeez, man.
idea of Batman and Joker is Batman has the sort of moral high ground on most things, honestly. He's obviously not afraid of violence, because that's the only language that some folks speak, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's what he does.
But the Joker's whole purpose is he's not trying to kill Batman, and he doesn't really care about his identity.
No.
He wants to break him. He wants him to give in to, in this case, what would be a shadow self of his. The Joker is sort of the shadow self to Bruce Wayne's ego.
Yes.
But the Joker wants to be heard, to be seen, to be felt. He wants his presence known, and he wants to make Bruce Wayne break any one of his different moral codes. He wants him to embrace the shadow side of himself.
Right.
That is his whole purpose. He kills other people, not necessarily because he wants to kill people. He kills people because he's trying to break Batman in a mental sense to get him to embrace these darker sides. He wants the Batman to come and kill him, because that would be the ultimate victory in his eyes.
Ooh, that's it.
If he dies to the Batman, then the Joker wins.
And I think it was the 2019 one that was a little. That one was a little bit dark. Well, all of them are dark, but that one was like dark, dark. But as I was watching, there was a scene where he had the fire. He was standing out there with a sign, and the guys took his sign and they like ran off with it, and just the guy was, it was the perfect example of kick him while he's down, but
Yes.
it was almost like his character was so gritty and so dark that he became a mirror of what he had experienced, as if to show
Oh,
other people, hey, this is what you have created.
the Joaquin Phoenix Joker was brilliant, absolutely
Yeah.
brilliant. That movie it felt less like it was supposed to be the Joker from Batman, which I still don't entirely know if it's supposed to be or not, because
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. We still don't have a Joker scheduled for Robert Pattinson, so it might be Joaquin Phoenix, it might not be. I really don't know. I kind of hope that it's not, just so that we can get a better origins. Well, not a better origin story, but a better
Mm-hmm.
counterpart to Pattinson's Batman, because that's
Yeah.
Pattinson's Batman had very little limitations in and of itself, and the Joaquin Phoenix Joker had very few limitations in itself, and I feel like it doesn't do justice to the duality of those characters
Right,
to
right.
have both of them be dark, gritty, semi-violent, and moody.
Yeah. Oh man. How do you feel about Rob Pattinson, like when he did the Batman? I kinda liked it. I'm not gonna lie.
I wasn't sure how I felt. It felt very
Yeah.
comic. For the sake of the comic, it felt accurate. It played a lot more into the investigative side. It tried to
Mm-hmm.
play him up less as, the Christian Bale of, oh, I'm Batman. Like, it was
Yeah.
less that and more of the sort of Sherlock Holmes side of Batman, if you will.
You're right,
He's
you're right.
supposed to be the world's greatest detective, and they never do that in the movies. It's always
Mm-mm.
just sort of like, oh, well, we'll stick Wayne Tech on it because I've got trillions and trillions of dollars and I can just pay somebody else to find the answers. What do I need to think for? I just go punch people and sound like a death metal singer. Like,
Oh man. Dark Tony Stark.
it basically is, yes. He
Man.
is what happens when Tony Stark is an emo kid instead of an alcoholic.
Yes. I was like, he has a different vice here. That's all. That's all it is. Man. So when we were talking about Carl Jung, I wanted to ask too, on the shadow self, why do you think so many people are scared of that? Like, what is you think they're scared to like just flip over like the Joker did and just one day just snap, or is it the fact that do you think they're more worried about what society would think of them if they were ever to snap?
A lot of it is that we've gotten very ingrained with the you need to conform, you need to be part of the herd. There's herd immunity, there's herd protection, there's the sheeple are real.
Yes,
I hate to
man.
say it, but
Woo.
the sheeple are very real, and unfortunately, they hold most of the cards.
Yeah, the masses.
It's
It's
kind of,
like it's so strange.
but I think part of there's a lot of things about the shadow self people they don't want to accept it, and everybody's got their own reasons,
Mm-hmm.
and most people have all of the reasons, really. They've got all the check boxes hit.
Oh
It's
gosh,
just a
yeah.
question of how boldly they hit that check box, how severe your particular aversion towards a part of your shadow self are, and it's going to be a different severity in each different category for each person. And then even the people who have a similar severity within a category are going to react to it differently
Mm-hmm.
because their ego is different from the other person. Any given comparison between people with identical singular factors is still going to be a very large pool of data to have to work with. And for that one corresponding factor, there are going to be millions of things that they just are not the same,
Mm-hmm.
or they are similar, but they are taken so many different ways.
Yeah. It makes me think
I
about. Oh, go ahead.
I know a lot of people that I've met. If I discuss these sort of things, which obviously this podcast is kind of geared towards philosophy, so you can
Mm-hmm.
just drop the cloak a little bit and let the
Yeah.
philosophy out. In regular conversation, you have to be a little picky about the words, otherwise people start scratching their noggins and looking confused and kind of dumb.
That's right. We'll
Um,
break it down.
But I think a lot of what people have problems with in the shadow self is the fact that they have done things, or
Mm-hmm.
rather, the shadow self has done things. It's done the things that they cannot believe are capable within them. It's done the things that they would look at themselves and say, I would never, and then they do it the next day.
Yeah, yeah. I
And
think
a
that's
lot of it,
terrifying.
I think, is accountability.
Right.
People don't want to be held accountable for their actions. So instead, they look at it and they go, oh, well, that's just the dark side of me that does things. Rather
Mm.
than looking at that dark side, sitting down at the table with it and saying, okay, you and I need to come to an understanding. How do you work? How are we going to work this out? We need to become one.
Right.
Because us being two is just leading to both of us getting nowhere.
Exactly. Exactly. That's a very good way to put that. And I think that I feel like there should be something in schools for that. But then again, like I said before, school is not meant for that. It's meant to create people who follow the masses. It's you ring a bell, we go to the same place, same time, do the same things every single day. It's a signal. It's just conditioning.
Yes, it's school has become less about education and more of a giant Pavlov machine.
Yes. Oh my
They
gosh.
they ring the bell, you run in, you get a treat.
Yes. And then you
Unfortunately,
panic when
the
you're out of
treat is
line.
that you get taught to be a good little robot and that you're supposed to be punctual and be polite and be. Well, I'm not
Exactly.
saying not to be impolite, as but they just it's a lot of school being a miniature society in and of itself
Mm-hmm.
because you end up with your social hierarchies within there. You end up with, the jocks don't like the goths, don't like the cheerleaders, don't like the nerds, don't like and then you just carry to each one of the different social standings. It's almost like having tribes, and it's kind of
Yeah.
ridiculous because it does get primal in there.
It does.
It's like a daycare prison mixture.
Oh my God, you never lied. Okay, so I was late to the party on Orange is the New Black. I know it's like a super side note, super random. But when I watched that, I was like, man, this is high school with like daggers and it was high school. That was it. They were all
I mean, hell,
competing.
depending on what high school you went to, the daggers might not have even been missing.
Hell yeah, they'll shank you in a minute. You just you're just in there.
You
Wrong
looking at my
place.
chocolate milk? Are
Right.
you?
And don't dare step on somebody's shoes. Like, oh my
Oh, hell
gosh.
no.
Man. But it's
They
just
spent
like
all the
so
first
crazy.
period trying to scuff the dirt off of those from their abusive parents. Lord knows, you leave a scuff on them, they will kill you.
Oh yes, and that's a
With the
whole
shoe.
yeah right with the shoe. Oh, and that's a whole nother podcast in itself. But like, oh, we got to revisit that one because like looking back on high school, I realized how confusing it was to like basically witness everybody separate themselves into these little boxes and even then I realized like they always say people in high school, oh, they're finding themselves, they're finding out who they are, and I was so confused because I thought finding yourself meant that you had to pick one of those. And a little bit of me was in all of them. I was the band geek, I was the dancer, I was the comedian, I was the nerd. It was all of those things. I never fit perfectly into one of them. And if you were the same way, and I'm sure many people were, it's like that's a very confusing time.
That that time period bred a lot of apathy,
Yeah.
and a lot of people don't. There's a negative connotation about the word apathy. This is a complete side branch, but apathy it's actually from the
Mm-hmm.
Latin word apathia, which is
Ah.
to not give in to your passions. It's
Oh.
not to say that you don't have emotions. It's to say that you don't give in to passions. You don't give in to
Okay.
the thoughts that are bred from the emotions that you have in reaction to something happening to you.
Mm.
The idea that someone slanders you, someone calls you a name. Oh, you're fat. Okay, well, that was their choice to attempt to slander you.
Uh huh.
You were not hurt.
Exactly.
You were not offended. That's the tricky thing about being offended is that you decide when you get to be offended. If
Yeah.
someone else attempts to offend you and you say your statement means nothing to me,
Exactly.
then you haven't been offended. Don't allow yourself to become hurt and you won't have been.
I feel like that is a practice. I always think of Cat Williams, how he was talking about He got up there. Everybody knows Flavor Flav is like, he's just his own character, and he's so much of him that it's obnoxious because the
It is. He's
yeah,
a walking meme, and he plays it so well.
that's the thing, he plays his character well, and he makes that mask, or he makes his ego something of value, no matter how ridiculous he may think it is, maybe even, or how ridiculous other people may think it is. There was something Cat Williams said, and he said, he got up there and he was like, I asked this fool basically how much money he was making, and they didn't call him every name in the book, racial slurs and everything. Look, I'm kind of slurring myself. I've had some of this Captain Morgan, so hang with me. but um but
By the way,
basically,
this podcast brought to you by Captain Morgan. You know,
yes,
sponsors. So
send me a check, man. Bottoms up. Yeah, but
let me just lift my leg casually. All
right?
right, we're good.
Yes, there we go. Snap a picture. We'll put that in the notes. But yeah, Cat Williams was basically saying, he was like, I don't understand how this fool got up there and let those people do that to him. Look, and he was like, he said that he looked at him and he was pretty much just laughing his tail off. He was like, cause they pay me, and he just like jogs off, just enjoy. But I'm like, yo, that man is so free. We don't even think about it. He's so free.
Yes, he has escaped one of the greatest prisons that we have ever known as humankind, which is the opinion of others.
Yeah. And same thing with like Jim Carrey. People think he's off his rocker, but I'm like, no, that guy, he's so, like, he gets it. He's already reached to what we are trying to get to, but they'll judge him so heavily. But I'm like, no, 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 you don't get it, my bro. When he got on Ellen DeGeneres and flipped his chair over, I was like, this guy is a guru, and he doesn't even know.
Yes, he is. It's weird that people try and they think of the term guru, and they think of this
He's on a
this
rock.
perfect being, and he just sort of sits around, cross-legged styled, and they're meditating all the time, and the only time they ever dare to speak and interrupt the silence of nature and the way that the universe is existing is to speak these deep and profound words of wisdom that you might only ever hear once in your lifetime, and you will carry with you to your grave, thinking and trying to figure out what the meaning of that. No, that's not a guru. A
No.
guru is someone you can look at and garner something to make your life less of the prison that people have tried to design it to be.
Right. They understand it and they can utilize their material world for their freedom.
It's something that Marcus Aurelius, who, by the way, aside from being kind of a crappy ruler for Rome, he was actually an extremely insightful philosopher. The man has got some brains in him, or rather he did.
Yeah, yeah.
Being ancient Roman and all, he definitely does not anymore.
Man.
Marcus Aurelius said that he did not have a singular teacher, because a lot of people think that the idea of philosophy is something that you learn directly, almost like a lifestyle that you just, it's handed from master to student to student to student, and it doesn't quite work like that.
Right.
He said that his life was consistent of numerous teachers. His mother taught him generosity. His grandfather, on one side of his family, taught him the value of saying no and meaning it. Other people would teach him other things. He would learn from merchants that he would meet in business transactions, other political leaders. He would learn things from them. And it led to what I really feel like, if you wanna grind the fruit and get down to the juice of it, philosophy to me is taking the things that you encounter and knowing what parts of them are you. There's this weird sort of interconnectivity between everybody's thought processes that within every person that you meet, you are going to find at least one positive thing and at least one thing that you can connect to. They may not be the same thing, by the way.
Yeah.
Everybody in an AA meeting has not necessarily got a positive thing you can connect with, but everybody there is still hungover. So
I think that's just it, though. It's like, I try, and it's hard because there was a point in time where, which I'm sure it's the same with a lot of people, I feel like when you reach adulthood, there is a sudden spark that you get from being around certain people. And it's mostly because it's not only because you see part of yourself in them, but it's because you can take something that you don't have that they do, and you can put it on, I don't want to say put it on a pedestal, but you can kind of put it on a shelf and admire it, but you can use it. Every single person, even the person that you hate the most, there's something that they presented to you in this particular reality in order for you to advance to the next level. And some people will
Yes.
shut that out so quick, and it's so big now that I feel like it's just people are running on this robotic false sense of self that's driving their reality. And I'm like, dude, at some point in time you have to realize the whole universe isn't you. There's other people that are, they're pieces of the greater consciousness, that bigger portion, you know?
Yes, that's part of the danger of something like a manufactured mindset, which
Yes.
is something that we have a lot of nowadays, where people say, "Oh, well, I'm associated with this group," and it's
Mm-hmm.
like, "Oh, okay, are you actually are you actually part of that belief system? Are you truly that, or is it because that is the only thing you have ever known, possibly?"
Mm-hmm.
In the case of some sheltered kids, some people who had no positive light in their life except for maybe possibly religion. We use that because it's a pretty common example
Right.
where you have somebody come from a broken home and the only thing that they've ever really had was God, Jesus, Allah, Yahweh, whichever direction you want to go with the religious belief.
Mm-hmm.
But is that actually you, or did you just never have the opportunity to try to cultivate what is actually you? And you do need a sense of being. You do need a sense of reason in life. So you decided that you were going to use the one that is available, which,
Yeah.
desperate times, desperate measures, I understand. It's a journey in and of itself to try and figure out who you are, especially amongst a sea of other people who are going to tell you who you are.
Right.
But it is a journey that I feel like everyone should really make. There should never be something that walks into your life that you just look at and go, that is absolute.
Exactly.
Question all of it.
Everything.
Every bit. Every grain of sand on this beach, I don't care how long it takes you, look at it.
Yep. That's part
Because
of
you
the
will never
experience.
find the grain that is you until you find the grain that is you. And maybe it's the first one you pick up. Maybe you're really lucky with it or really good at it. There is a certain level of luck and skill in trying to find yourself, but maybe the first grain you pick up is you.
Mm.
It's probably not. You can pick it up. You can say that first grain is you.
Right.
You might be lying to yourself to do it, and now you're in the exact same boat. You've now wasted time trying to find yourself, only to lie to yourself and never find yourself in actuality. All you did was waste time.
Mm. And so
You
many
have to
people
be
do that.
honest with yourself.
Exactly. It's it's the journey and not the destination.
Yes.
Okay, so you're going to have to break down a little bit more of the Jungian philosophy on the mind, because um, I'm not familiar with the depths of Carl Jung and how the levels. I know you mentioned the ego, the anima, the animus, and the persona. How do you think that plays in with like the levels of mind as far as the unconscious mind, subconscious, and the conscious mind?
Do you want to turn this into a 3-hour podcast?
I might be tiptoeing in
This,
dangerous territory. They're not ready. I'm not
you,
ready.
you said, I know this is going to be deep, and I'm like, oh, God. Oh, no, she has no idea.
We're already in the rabbit hole. How far are we going
This
with
is
this rabbit?
for what it's worth, the things that I know about Jungian psychology are still things that I will go back to and reread, or if it was a video, rewatch, re-listen to audio, whatever the media may have been.
Right.
I will go back and revisit things because some of the beauty of Carl Jung's work was that it is adaptive. It is highly adaptive, and as you gain perspective on things, it is important to look. A lot of people say that you should never look back, but all that means is that mistakes that you've made in the past you are now ignoring, and if you make them again, it is entirely on you. It is your fault now.
Right. Exactly. Universe
However,
is like,
as
hey,
you
we showed
learn
you
more
this.
things, if you regularly stop for a second and say, okay, well, I have I have learned something. There has been growth. There has been some self cultivation, some
Right.
progress made in my search for self. Let me take a second. Stop moving forward. Something that people have a lot of difficulty with, and a lot of them won't admit it, is
Mm-hmm.
that they can't stop moving forward because society has put this emphasis on the yin aspect of you always need to be moving forward. There always needs to be forward progress, but they don't stop to think that the other side of that, the
Mm-hmm.
yang side of being actively progressive, there is such a thing as being passively progressive. You
Yes.
can stop and contemplate and just look at something for a moment instead of having to always move on to the next project, the next task, the next deadline, the next whatever goal it is that you're chasing at the moment. By all means, have goals. It is a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
But realize that you don't have to run to meet the finish line. Sometimes you can sit there and just consider things, and you will find that the finish line is not, you know, 200 meters out. The finish line is actually right here. You just gotta find it.
Thank you for joining me and Alex on the first portion of the Philosopher's Stone podcast. The second portion will be available only on Patreon. Thanks for listening. We will now be entering into the second portion of the Philosopher's Stone podcast, co-starring Alexander Paetzel. I want to thank my Patreons. A special thank you to you guys. Thank you for your support, for your love, and also thank you to Mohammed, aka King Ibu of Electric Chameleon, for making this awesome track that you guys will probably be hearing on some upcoming skits and other productions by BlueFoxx. Thank you guys. I love you so much.
It's a search. Now, you may still have to step forward some to find it. Passivity won't fix everything.
Mm-hmm.
There has got to be a balance there. There needs to be activity. There needs to be passivity. But the combination will get you much farther than just burning yourself out on a day-to-day grind of always trying to move forward. If people don't experience adversity, they don't know how to experience adversity. It's one of those weird, you really have to go swimming to figure out how deep that water is. But
I get that.
I feel like people should always try to have some adversity, have some negativity in their life, because when you lean into negativity a little bit and you learn how to deal with it, you learn how to deal with it. When it comes a time that you don't have the choice but to deal with the negativity, if you know how to deal with it, it won't be so bad. But if you've spent all of your time trying to find something to make you happy and take all the negativity out of your life and, positive vibes only, that one's been kicking me in the butt here lately, because I'll see people post it and I'm like, you wouldn't hold up to one harsh word, not one.
Oh gosh, no.
But
it took me a while to get that.
A little bit of adversity in your life will temper your willpower immensely.
That's a good way to
I encourage people to go out. Like, this is going to sound kind of dumb, but go out and find a fucking problem.
Yeah.
Go find something you don't want to do. Go find something that you are not entirely comfortable with. Treat it like exposure therapy. If you're afraid of the elevator because it's a closed-in box that might be some kind of a high-velocity dropping death trap, go stand 5 feet from it. It didn't kill you yet. Go stand 4 feet from it. 3, 2, 1. Now you're in the elevator. Are you dead yet? Cool, you're cured.
The treasure is in the cave you dare not enter.
Yes.
I agree.
But people should really, I feel like they should really grab a hold of the idea that the human mind is capable of thought and evolution, and help make themselves a better self. And by making yourself a better self, you will inevitably become a better you. A lot of these statements are going to sound redundant, but it's things that people just don't think about sometimes.
Well, I think they're tied up in it's the distraction after distraction after distraction. after distraction. I feel like we've
Yes.
already been through like 5 ends of the world. There was Y2K. That's the earliest one I remember. And I was like, hold on, what? No, the computers are going to shut off and we're all going to die. I'm confused. So I was like maybe 9, 10 then. But it's just been one thing after the next. And part of me realizes, like, well, shit, this shit's going to happen anyway. And we're all going to die in the end. Like, why worry about the distractions? Let me focus on the stuff, like, what is actually scaring me and what is actually making me so uncomfortable. And that's where people they don't want to look at that, you know? Terrifying thing, I
Yes.
guess.
It's I I could I simultaneously understand but don't understand the fear of death. It's a
Mm-hmm.
from a primal sense, I understand why people are afraid to die. From a personal sense, I've never been afraid to die. It's going to happen one day. I'm either going to die from old age or I'm going to get ripped apart by wild animals. One of those wild animals might be a human being, so we've got that on the table, and they're everywhere
Right?
in these, several ton rolling death machines that can go hundreds of miles an hour. I mean, you know, that's it's only going to take one bad thing to happen and you're dead.
Yeah. And that's it. I feel like that's the worst part of it. It's just that particular short moment in time versus the all the other, years we spent on this planet, the good and the bad. It's like I feel like death is something that we have completely just flipped on its head. I don't think it was meant to be something to be feared. And yet, that is the greatest weapon is the threatening of somebody with death, whether it be you take this medication and there's a side effect of death, or if you don't take it there's death, or if you drink this substance there's this effect, or if you drive, there's just so many things that could bring you face to face with death, and most people will run as soon as you say the word, they'll run in the other direction. But it's something that
Yes,
we all have to face. And if it's something we all have to face, you would think, hey, if you're going to go through that too, and this person is going to go through that, what the heck are we scared of? It's the unknown.
there there's a quote that I always felt like really really summed up what death. I'm not gonna say what death is because I don't know what it is. It's the cessation of life, yes, but like there's the whole potential afterlife, and that's a that's an entire other subject to not try and rile up at the moment.
Oh, you're good. You're good. It's a lot to
But
it.
death is definitely something it needs acceptance, but it doesn't need fear.
Yeah,
People seem to get those things confused.
I agree. I agree.
Because you need to look at death and say, "I know you're going to happen. You are on my timeline somewhere down in the future." Don't look at it and say, "I need to count down the days until I'm going to die." Just look at it and say that one day I'm going to die. And until then, why do you want to? Let's say you live 50 years.
Right.
50. We're just going to a nice little number there. 50.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to live 50 years. You find out at the age of 10 that you're going to die. You come to, understand people are okay talking about death around you kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
You've got another 40 years to not give a shit about death
Right.
because it's not within your control. It's not something that you can directly influence.
Mm-mm.
The thing that you do have is your agency of self. You get to choose how you feel about death. If you want to live your entire life afraid of death, it is not death that is making you afraid of death. You are making death something that you fear. You are making the choice to look at this thing and so say that this is going to rule my every waking moment
Mm-hmm.
until it gets here.
It's the
You have,
perception that has to change.
yes,
I
there
feel
is
like,
there is never a thing that a person has to actually fear that they did not choose to give the power to make them afraid.
that's it. And a lot of people make fear their God, whether it be subconsciously, unconsciously, but you can tell that it runs their life because everything they do is geared to not dying. And I'm like, I feel like the focus should be living, but it's so hard. Even me,
Well,
like it's so hard. I can preach it all day, but it's difficult at times.
it's not just that they live in fear of dying. They live in this sort of state of preparing to die and preparing everything for when they're going to be gone. It's like once you're gone, you're just gone. It's
right? Like, who
You you
cares?
can you can deal with your funeral expenses. You can worry about having a retirement so that you have a comfortable life before you die. You can, there's any number of things that have to pertain to death that you would never think of if you weren't subconsciously afraid of dying.
Right,
If you
right.
drop the fear of death, you drop so many other stressors on yourself that will aid you and in turn make you die faster. It's kind of stupid. If you're afraid of death, death will find you faster because you're spending your time ruining your mental and physical health, fearing this thing that you
And
have no power over.
deteriorating. Yeah. I feel like that's the ultimate freedom is not only freedom from the ego, but freedom from death. When you can meet it and say, "Hey, we'll meet again one day." And when we meet that last time, that's it. And that's okay.
Death is an old friend, I think, is a good way to put it. Death is an old friend, and one day he is going to stop by for a drink, and that will be it.
And that's it.
He will stop by, you will have your drink, and you will walk on.
I always wonder what makes us so afraid of it though, because we can't there's something encapsulated by the body. We all know that, hopefully to some degree. But I always wonder, once that sheds, how free we would be. But nobody really thinks about that part. We always think of how much suffering comes with losing the physical body and transcending the physical realm and entering into something. And again, maybe it's the unknown. I get it. But I'm like, gosh, what else could we possibly go through that we haven't went through already? And again, religion plays a huge factor because a lot of that is revolving around the fear of death and where you may or may not go afterwards.
I think he was Roman because, unfortunately, Greek and Roman names are
They're very
occasionally
closely,
a little too similar.
yeah, very closely knit in verbiage and pronunciation and just relativity, really.
Do not wish for no bad. Do not wish for no negative things to happen to you. Instead, wish for the strength to handle negativity when it shows up.
Mm,
There's a second
I
part to
like
it, and
that.
that's the part I'm having trouble trying to remember.
Ah, I like that though.
Do,
It's truth.
do not do not wish for things to be in your favor. Rather, wish that all things simply be.
Mm,
Don't want things. Don't expect the universe. Don't expect nature to bend to your will and to make life exactly the way that you want it to be, because how you want it to be is not necessarily in balance or accordance with nature.
oh yeah. And nature is
Instead,
very
simply
precise.
hope that things happen as they happen and that you have the strength to move through and find the positive where it is, find the negative where it is, and accept both.
That's the key.
Now, the fun part of that is that that was a Roman or Greek philosopher. I'm pretty sure he was Roman. I don't know why, but I keep thinking that he was a Roman.
Huh.
But that is a Roman philosopher preaching what is one of the very core beliefs of Taoism, which is definitely not Roman.
Mm.
It's
Not at all.
some of these wonderful overlaps between different philosophical views. I myself very much believe in the Tao and its, I'm not going to say teachings because it feels, once you understand what the Tao really represents, which none of us can, the
Oh yeah. As soon as you name it, it's no longer the
yes,
Tao.
Lao Tzu said at the beginning of the Tao Te Ching that the eternal Tao, the Tao which can be named is not the Tao which can be described is not the eternal Tao. The name which can be spoken is not the eternal name. The Tao is something mystical and it can be somewhat understood in a base sense, but it's so much more, so very infinite and in everything with the different balances that nature has provided in all things that it does.
Mm. That book
And
is so heavy on quantum mechanics that
it's always been something very very interesting to see those two, the Stoic philosophers of your Roman Empire and the like, that part of Europe, and as long as it's kind of centralized in the Mediterranean, I guess. We'll call it Europe. It is.
Yeah.
But to see that there's that connection between European philosophy and Asian philosophy that
Mm-hmm.
never interacted with each other ever. They had such similar views, and they were saying things and having people understand things that are sort of these just fundamental universal truths.
Right.
If two people say the same thing, but they've never met, never discussed the subject, it lends some credence to it being the truth.
Right. Exactly.
If you know it and I know it and he knows it and she knows it, but none of us have ever talked of the topic, we just meet and we all say the same thing at the same time. There's a little dialect change, obviously, because we come from different parts of the world, different experiences and things, but
Of course.
we all come together and we say the same thing. We utter the same word. How can, in that instance, that word not be truth?
Mm. Wow. It's that other layer of the mind that everybody is on. It's that frequency that everybody is tuned into just enough to connect to the great all. Kind of like
Yes.
the pyramids. There were pyramids not only in Egypt, but there were pyramids built almost in the same fashion in continents that had never interacted at that time, supposedly. But it was just that historical portion nobody really examines like that, but they knew something and they knew it at the same time, and yet there was no interaction on a physical level.
Yes. The pyramids of ancient and slightly less ancient Egypt, because they were built across several large spans of time.
Mm-hmm.
And then things like the ziggurats of the Babylonians.
Yeah,
Technically, Babylon would have been somewhat close to Egypt. So in that case, you could say maybe the Egyptians were influenced by the Babylonians.
I could see that.
But like you said, there are ziggurats in other parts of the world that
Mm-hmm.
had no contact whatsoever. There is no chance that the Incans, Mayans, and Azteca had the chance to meet an Egyptian and go over the architectural blueprints of a pyramid. They built it. They just did.
Exactly.
Now, they look a little different because pyramids are very sheer on the sides, and ziggurats are built more like they have stepstone kind of construction to them.
Right, right.
But at the end of the day, the human subconscious has that sort of blueprint. They looked at it and they said this particular geometry as a building, and generally as some kind of a ritual building of sorts. And in the
Mm-hmm.
case of the pyramids, it was a tomb. In the case of the ziggurats, it was close to being an altar.
Yeah.
But the importance there is it's present. The Egyptians were very big on their burial rites. Ergo, you could look at the pyramids as if they were a final altar. They were the last place that those people buried inside were going to pray at.
Mm-hmm.
They would worship one last time beneath this large triangular, I can't really call it a pyramid shape because they're called pyramids, and that just feels so dumb. But same way with the ziggurats. That's where take take their sacrifices to their different gods
Uh-huh.
for fertility, for fortune in war, fortune in trade, uh, good health, all the different things that their pantheon would have. They would go up there and make their offerings to their gods,
Right.
and it was basically the same.
And I'm
Egyptian,
wondering.
you're offered up to Anubis.
Mm-hmm.
In the South Central Americas, you were offered up to somebody. I'm sure there's a lot
Oh,
of
they have
gods
a
in those
lot of.
pantheons. You were offered up to
Yeah.
somebody, I promise you.
Some kind of deity is going to get you one way or the other. And it makes me wonder looking at the structure of it. I know with Egyptians, the essentially the worshiping of the Ka, like the top of the pyramid, very much represents the chakra system. But they had this in multiple cultures they had a symbol of something that represented this climb towards a higher being, or when they needed something they would ask this higher being. And I wonder if that physical structure is what's disconnecting us. We don't have, I mean, yeah, we have churches, we have the cross, but I feel like the pyramid is, there's something energetically different about that structure that kind of brings the self in the physical realm to something that represents something outside of the physical realm at the same time.
Well, if you look at the cross in comparison to something like a pyramid, looking at it from a religious, sort of spiritual, not religious, there we go, from a spiritual standpoint,
Yeah.
the pyramid, the ziggurat, all those sort of, triangular, they have a very clear top and a clear bottom.
Mm-hmm.
That's just it. They have a pinnacle. They
Mm-hmm.
have a point at which all things become one. All sides of the pyramid at the top are the same
Yes.
for just a brief moment. In the
Mm-hmm.
cross, you don't have that. The
Yeah.
focal point of the cross is at the center of it, not at the top. Jesus wasn't hung up on a T.
It's in the center.
And I feel like, in a sense, I'm not trying to take any bashes at Christianity. Sorry for anybody that did get offended by the comparison. In a sense, putting your focal point more at the center of something
Mm-hmm.
generally takes away from some of the, I suppose in this case, the divinity of having it be on one sheer end or another.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at it, people remember the lowest lows in human history and the highest highs in human history.
Yes.
They remember the most deplorable evils that has ever happened. They remember the greatest goods that have ever happened.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody really remembers the in-between.
No.
So having your focal point be in between is saying that you're sort of placing your divinity on the off chance that somebody might maybe look in the center where they tend to just find mediocre things, and they will lump it all together.
That's a good way to look at that.
And it's kind of weird.
It is kind of weird. And I've always wondered too, and again, not to like get too deep into Christianity, but the cross is a very finicky thing to present to the mind, because I know growing up Southern Baptist, to as a child, that story in itself was terrifying. So even in jewelry, just seeing a crucifix, that story would replay, and I'm like, good God, like that was awful what happened. But it was, I didn't know any better, but I think as a kid, that was being implanted in the mind. Every time you see a cross, yeah, people are like, oh, well, you wear them just as anything else. Like people wear alms, or they'll wear, like the Eye of Horus or an Ankh or whatever. But because of the exposure to that story and how the delivery was at such a young age, it was horrifying almost in a way. And I'm like, people are wearing that on their neck, and it was just to me it was
You start
strange.
realizing that people are wearing what is essentially a sacrificial icon on their neck.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think they thought of it like that, but
Like,
I did.
if you want to put it in another context, instead of a cross, what if? God, this sounds terrible. Instead of wearing a piece of jewelry that is a cross,
Mm-hmm.
the cross could be swapped out for something like a guillotine.
Yeah, yeah.
It could be swapped out for an electric chair. It could be swapped out for a noose. It could be swapped out for several
Right.
soldiers in a firing line. It
Right.
could, it was the cross was idolized.
I would say so.
I'm not sure what word I'm looking for, because idolized is not
Yeah, I guess
it's not quite the definition I'm looking for.
and it's a tricky thing when you get into these conversations, because it's like sometimes there aren't words to to really yeah. Sometimes
It became a piece of iconography in and of itself. It became the
Yeah,
icon
I
of
get
Jesus. However, at its core value, the crucifixion was a
Oh.
punishment of the Roman Empire that was usually reserved for petty bandits or
Yeah.
enemy soldiers that were captured,
Right, right.
traitors, any number of things. Not things that you would immediately associate with Jesus by most standards of what Jesus was.
Right, exactly. And it's funny
But
because, oh, go ahead.
for somebody to walk around wearing a cross, if that were the case, and I walked around with a pseudo blinged out guillotine blade on my necklace, and you looked crooked at me, it's like,
Yeah.
well, you're wearing the same thing. Mine kills you instantly. Yours takes like 3 to 5 business days.
Exactly. In a sense, yeah, that's it.
Like
I always
you've got the FedEx of capital punishment there.
right. Talk about PTSD, man.
You will hang up there for days,
Yes, and that was
and it won't even
no
clean your
easy.
nails.
Oh no, not at all. Just rusty. There was no. I don't that whole story and just the experience of, especially hearing it for the first time, is just gruesome. But I feel like it's a weird thing to look at from outside of Christianity, and I know I can't really say that because that's how I grew up. But examining it in a different way from a different perspective, I'm like, I always wonder. To me, it would make more sense to think of Jesus Christ as Christ consciousness, as a son, like as a personified. How do I want to put this? God became man so he could show man how to become the God that is within, which is where people don't look. They look outside of themselves. And he was trying to convey a message that was so heavy. He knew what was going to happen to him. And he said, you know what? He understood death in a way that we didn't, and we probably never will. But I always think the conveyance of Jesus Christ and that whole crucifixion would be more or better represented as a son, because he was the son of God. But again, same story as Horus, which I don't know. It's interesting how those stories tie in. But again, that's one of those. It's another podcast in itself.
Yes, we've hit several of those. We've tripped over any number of different things that have been like, oh, well, that's 3 hours some of the time.
Right? We're actually at the magical 1 hour and 11 minutes actually. So
Holy shit.
I know, right? It doesn't feel like that long, but when you get rolling on these philosophical topics, I guess it happens. We're diving deep. We're diving deep.
Well, we had also said that this was going to be more of a freeform kind of thing, so
Oh yeah.
it was intended more as a understanding how perspectives meet in the middle. That way, when people decide that they want to come and listen to another episode, they have an idea of where the seam work is in.
Exactly. Awesome. I'm gonna wrap up this episode. Anything else you wanted to add?
You want to turn this into a 3? No.
4 hours later, BlueFoxx is still on.
I mean, I'm usually up until about 5 o'clock in the morning anyway, so let me just crack my knuckles and go hit the convenience store
right?
before we do this.
Ongoing for the next. I don't know how much Captain Morgan I can take. I'm gonna call it quits. It's last call on that one.
I'll tell you what, tag you out, tag me in. I'll man the captain.
Yes.
I'm built to bear, so I'll be good for a little while, at least long enough for you to sober up.
There we go. Well, there shall be more. Thanks once again for joining us on the Philosopher's Stone podcast. There shall be many more, my friends. Thanks again. Namaste.